We're being joined by Dr. Hussaini Abdu from our Abuja studios. He's a political scientist, as well as the country director of Plan International. Dr. Abdu, thank you so much for joining us. Let me at this juncture also say that we did invite the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Parliamentary Affairs, the Senate, that is Senator Ita Eneng, but we haven't as yet heard from him. But Dr. Abdu, what do you make of this entire debate? The bill has been rejected by the President. He gave reasons for this rejection, and the debate is ongoing. The House of Representatives is scheduled to debate it this morning. Now, what do you make of his rejection of it for the fourth time?
Well, for me, one, I'm not a lawyer, and I'll be very careful about drawing conclusions on certain issues. I'm a political scientist, and I do development. I'm practically, I try as much as possible to not to double into what I don't understand. But for me, as somebody who had worked on election on several African countries, my attitude today is that, look, it is very clear that we ran into this crisis because there is practically no good working relationship between the executive and the legislature. An electoral law practically is not simply a prerogative of the parliament. Of course, the parliament passes the law, but if there is a very strong relationship between the executive and the legislature, there will have been the clearer and proper engagement, creating a common understanding. And in fact, because the Electoral Commission is an executive institution, and practically, as far as the Constitution is concerned, it's an executive institution. And therefore, some of its issues, its concerns, and everything that needs to be reflected in the law could properly be captured through a good working relationship, and eventually the parliament could pass it, and then the president can actually sign it off. But from the beginning, from the institution of the current assembly, there hasn't been a good working relationship. And whatever happened to this electoral bill is practically a product of this poor working relationship. And so whatever permutation, whatever analysis that anybody can actually give on this is built on this poor working relationship, the mutual suspicions that existed between the parliament and the executive. And so it suffered a fundamental crisis, unfortunately, for the elections. And so that's, for me, my approach to this particular issue. Is this a very good learning opportunity for us as a country? Yes, it is. The second dimension and perspective to this is that, look, we have a very terrible history of electoral lawmaking in the country.
Okay, if I may interrupt you here.
We actually make electoral laws.
Let me just interrupt you briefly.
We make this.
Hold on. The fact that they had several meetings, our last guest talked about the fact that he knew they had several meetings. For that fourth document to be worked out and sent to the president, the three stakeholders, the legislature, the executive, and INEC had that meeting. INEC hasn't complained about anything here, about the document. But you say it failed because of the bad working relationship between the executive and the legislature. How could it be then that they sat down and worked out the document together?
No, you see, bad working relationship doesn't actually mean that you don't talk. And even in the workplace. In your workplace, yeah, people that you don't probably have a relationship with, but because you have to work, and from time to time, you get to engage each other. I'm not making excuses for anybody, not for the parliament, not for the executive, but the truth about it is that for me, conversation on these issues, you have to look at it on the structural basis. What is the root cause? Where is the root cause? Otherwise, when you continue to just look at the symptoms of these issues, you don't deal with it. It's unfortunate that we have to run into elections without actually getting an electoral law or a new law that will probably address some of the challenges we had with the 2015 elections. And we are also very clear, the 2015 the electoral law, we also know how we went through what we went through it and how it actually got passed at the late hour. The same thing in 2011, I guess, if I'm not mistaken, or 2003 elections. It's been crisis of electoral lawmaking. Because once electoral law gets, and we'll be making this very clear to both the parliament and the executive, once the electoral lawmaking processes get into the election year, it becomes a crisis. Because a lot of conversations, a lot of permutations, what serves my interest, what don't serve my interest, how can this support my electoral victory or how would it undermine my electoral victory, and whatever comes into the whole permutations.
Now, Dr. Abdul, I want to take you in a slightly different direction, even though the subject is related. And it wasn't covered by the Electoral Amendment Bill. And some people have said, well, it wouldn't be covered because many of those who are involved were part of those who drafted the Electoral Amendment Bill. And I'm referring to vote buying. Now, it's one of the things that for many people is an even bigger worry in the electoral process than even the issue of smart card readers and so on. That if voters can be compromised in the course of the election, that no matter what it is you are doing on the side of procedure, it will come to naught if there is an opportunity for people to take any kind of inducement and then cast their votes on the basis of that inducement. Is that a fair comment?
Depending on where you sit and depending on how you understand vote buying, it could actually be a fair comment. For me, and I'm sorry, I have a very different attitude and approach to this vote buying. My sense is that the conversations, particularly by politicians and some of us in the civil society and the media, we are probably speaking to the gallery, and we are not responding to the realities of the crisis of our elections. Vote buying is unacceptable, particularly any vote buying mechanism that will compromise the secrecy of our ballot. Examples, you go to the polling stations and then you try to induce voters throwing cash and giving them cash, or getting people to take a shot of their ballot paper, and then they come to you and present it to you, and then you use that to pay them. That is totally, for me, unacceptable because it compromises that secrecy of ballot, which is very primary. It's the major thing that protects the sanctity of that procedure that has been put in place. But beyond that, my brother, a liberal democracy, for me, from where I sit, is practically a system that runs on gratification. Whether it is immediate gratification or it is delayed gratification. In the poorer society like our own, the immediacy of the need for gratification is always there. And it is the poor that actually gets through those things. And the people, including the politicians who are talking about it, knew that this is what they do. From the day they are elected into power to the next moment when they were going to run into election, everything they do, their interface with their communities and society is more around how to protect and how to make sure that next time they get voted for. And for me, we are not looking at this conversation in a very holistic manner. One, why is this happening? Can you look at poverty in the country? Why would anybody, you look at the depth of poverty and the crisis of exclusions that people experience in our communities. Two, look at the level of poor accountability of our politicians. Once a politician is elected to the national level, he moves to Abuja, he barely goes to his constituency. If he's elected at the state level, he moves to his state capital, he hardly goes back to his constituency. If he's elected at the local government level, he goes to his local government headquarters, he hardly goes back. And those elected at the national level, some of them are out of the country, and you never even see them in Abuja. So practically, there is no touch. And when there is no touch, in managing this poor accountability, people think that they can easily pay off and therefore get the result out by paying voters. But the voters themselves also, part of the crisis is that, look, because of the depth of poverty in our country, look, a lot of people, this 1,000 and 2,000 that we are talking about, as despicable, as unacceptable as it is, for some people, they cannot make 2,000 in a week or 1,000 naira in a week. And when these kind of things come, they collect it. So can we begin to have this conversation by dealing with the underlying issues that create this particular situation?